Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Hub. Today's story is one of my favorites.
You know how some people say they believe in fate? I never did. Not until that Saturday morning in October when I found myself digging through dusty boxes at the Riverside Flea Market, hunting for a book that probably didn't even exist. Botanical. Wonders of the 19th Century. I'd been searching for this elusive volume for 3 years, ever since Professor Martinez mentioned it in passing during my graduate botany seminar. The vendor's stall was chaos incarnate. Vintage vinyl records leaned against cracked picture frames, while mason jars filled with buttons sat next to moth-eaten sweaters. But buried beneath a pile of romance novels with their bodice-ripping covers, I spotted something promising. A weathered spine, the gold lettering barely visible. My heart hammered as I reached for it. This was it. This had to be it. But the moment my fingers grazed the leather binding, another hand touched mine. Warm, delicate, with dirt under the nails that spoke of someone who worked with their hands, who understood the language of growing things. I looked up, ready to apologize for the collision, and found myself staring into the most extraordinary eyes I'd ever seen. They were the color of fresh-cut sage, flecked with gold like sunlight filtering through leaves. Sun-bleached curls framed. A face that was both ethereal and earthbound, with a smudge of sunscreen on her nose that made her look like she'd just stepped out of a garden catalog. "Oops," she said, and her voice was like honey over gravel. "You're definitely more interesting than this book." My cheeks burned. I was 26 years old, working on my PhD in plant biology, and I'd just been reduced to a blushing undergraduate by a stranger at a flea market. "I'm sorry," I managed, though neither of us moved our hands away. "I was just looking for botanical treasures among the trash." She grinned, and dimples appeared in her cheeks. "Me too. I'm Danielle, by the way. Danielle Chen." "Juliana?" I whispered, wondering if she could feel my pulse racing through my fingertips. "Juliana Santos." She didn't let go of my hand. Instead, she turned the book over, and we both saw the title, Botanical Wonders of the 19th Century, in faded gold script. "No way," she breathed. "This is the Martinez book, isn't it? The one that's supposedly impossible to find." I stared at her. "You know about Professor Martinez? Know about him? I took his urban ecology course last spring. Changed my entire perspective on city gardening." She paused, studying my face. "Wait, you're not one of his graduate students, are you? The one who's working on that fascinating project about plant communication?" My mouth fell open. How did you? Word travels fast in the botany world, especially when someone's proving that plants actually do talk to each other. She finally released my hand, but only to gesture excitedly. "I've been following your research. Well, what little I could find about it. You're kind of a legend among the plant nerds." I felt like I was in some alternate universe where handsome strangers at flea markets knew about my obscure academic work. "You're a botanist?" "Landscape designer, actually. But I'm working on my master's in environmental design. Plants are my passion." She held up the book. "Should we split custody of this? I promise I'm housebroken." I laughed despite myself. "How about we grab coffee and discuss visitation rights?" "I thought you'd never ask." The coffee shop was one of those deliberately rustic places with exposed brick and succulents hanging from mason jars. We'd planned to stay for 20 minutes, maybe 30 if the conversation flowed well. 3 hours later, we were still there, and Danielle was doodling plant hybrids on napkins. "Okay, but what if," she said, her tongue poking out slightly as she concentrated on her drawing, "you crossed a tomato with a rose? Think about it, you'd get the structural beauty of the rose with the nutritional benefits of the tomato." I peered at her sketch. "That's not how plant genetics work, Danielle." You can't just mash two completely different species together and expect, says the woman who thinks talking to ferns helps them grow. She interrupted, grinning at me over her coffee cup. I gasped in mock offense. That's different. There's actual scientific evidence that plants respond to sound vibrations. I'm not just making things up. I'm not making things up either. I'm dreaming. There's a difference. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with mischief. Besides, you haven't heard my theory about carnivorous orchids yet? Carnivorous orchids aren't a thing. They could be. Picture this. All the elegance of a phalaenopsis, but with the predatory instincts of a Venus flytrap. Perfect for people who want beautiful flowers, but also have a mosquito problem. I was laughing now, really laughing, harder than I had in months. You're insane. I prefer visionary. She reached across the table, ostensibly to grab a sugar packet, but her thumb brushed against my wrist. You've got whipped cream on your lip. Time stopped. Her fingers were soft against my skin as she gently wiped away the cream. The simple touch sent electricity shooting through my entire nervous system. I'd never been one for casual physical contact. My friends always joked that I had the emotional availability of a cactus, but something about Danielle made me want to lean into her touch, to root myself in the warmth of her presence. There, she said softly, but she didn't pull her hand away. Better. I realized I was holding my breath. Thank you. You're welcome. We sat there for a moment, her thumb still resting against my bottom lip, both of us caught in the strange magic of the moment. The coffee shop faded away. The chatter of other customers became white noise. There was only Danielle, looking at me like I was something precious she'd found in her garden. Juliana, she said, and my name sounded different in her mouth, like a secret, like a promise. Yeah, I know we just met, but would you like to see my greenhouse? I've been working on something I think you'd find fascinating. I should have said no. I should have remembered that I was a serious academic who didn't do spontaneous greenhouse visits with beautiful strangers. But looking into those sage green eyes, I found myself nodding. I'd love that, really. Even though I believe in impossible plant hybrids, especially because of that. She beamed, and I realized that this wasn't just chemistry between us. This was something deeper. Something that felt like growth, like photosynthesis. Like a slow and steady process of two living things learning to thrive together. This was the moment I started falling in love with Danielle Chen. Danielle's greenhouse was a converted garage behind a craftsman bungalow in the arts district. The moment she opened the door, I was transported into another world. Humid air wrapped around us like a warm embrace, carrying the scent of jasmine and wet earth. Every surface was covered in green, towering palms brushed against the glass ceiling, while delicate ferns carpeted the floor. Orchids hung from hooks like living jewels, and in the center of it all was a workbench covered in seedlings. Welcome to my sanctuary, Danielle said, her voice soft with reverence. I know it's not much, but it's perfect, I breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. Danielle, this is incredible. She flushed with pride. It used to be my grandmother's. She left me the house when she passed last year, and I've been slowly converting everything into growing space. She gestured to a corner where tiny green shoots were emerging from seed trays. That's my current project. I'm trying to develop a strain of herbs that can thrive in urban pollution. I knelt beside the seedlings, recognizing the distinctive leaves, basil, oregano, and thyme, that I've been experimenting with selective breeding to enhance their natural resilience. The idea is to create something that can grow on rooftops and balconies, even in the heart of the city. That's brilliant. I looked up at her, genuinely impressed. Have you considered the symbiotic relationships? If you pair them with certain root vegetables, you could create a whole ecosystem that's exactly what I was thinking. She dropped down beside me, her knee brushing against mine. Look at this. She showed me a detailed notebook filled with sketches, measurements, and observations. Her handwriting was neat and precise, but peppered with little doodles of happy plants and encouraging notes to herself. Day 12. The oregano is being dramatic again, but I believe in you, little guy. You take notes like a scientist, I said, flipping through the pages. I take notes like someone who cares. She moved closer, pointing to a particularly complex diagram. This is my 5-year plan. I want to create community gardens and food. Desserts, spaces where people can grow their own nutrition even in the most challenging environments. I studied her face as she talked, watching the way her eyes lit up when she described her vision. This wasn't just a hobby for her, it was a calling. And suddenly, I understood why the universe had brought us together over that dusty book. You're trying to heal the world, I said softly. One plant at a time. She looked at me and something shifted in her expression. What about you? What drives you to talk to ferns and prove that plants have feelings? I considered the question, running my fingers along the edge of her notebook. I grew up in apartments. My mom worked 3 jobs, and we moved every year or 2. I never had a yard, never had a place to plant anything. But I found this old botany book in a library when I was 8, and I became obsessed with the idea that plants were living these rich, complex lives that nobody was paying attention to. And now you're giving them a voice? I'm trying to prove they already have one. We've just been too busy to listen. Danielle reached out and took my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. I think you're beautiful, Juliana Santos. Not just. Your face, though, that's pretty spectacular. Your mind. Your passion. The way you see the world. My heart hammered against my ribs. Danielle, ... Colt. I know we just met. I know this is crazy. But I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for someone who understands why I talk to my plants and dream about impossible hybrids. I looked down at our joined hands, at the way her thumb was tracing gentle circles on my palm. I feel it too. Good. She stood, pulling me up with her. Because I have something to show you. She led me to the back corner of the greenhouse, where a single orchid hung in a place of honor. It was unlike any orchid I'd ever seen. The petals were a deep purple that seemed to shimmer in the light, and the center was marked with intricate patterns that looked almost like writing. This is Miracle, Danielle said. My grandmother's last gift to me. She's been in the family for 3 generations, and according to family legend, she only blooms when something important is about to happen. She's gorgeous, I whispered, reaching out to touch one of the petals. I've never seen coloring like this. She hasn't bloomed in 2 years. Not since Grandma got sick. Danielle's voice was soft with emotion. But look. She pointed to a small bud that was just beginning to open, its petals still tightly furled, but showing hints of that extraordinary purple. She's about to bloom, I breathed. She started this morning, right after I met you. I turned to look at Danielle and found her watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Hope, maybe, or possibility. You don't really believe that's connected, do you? I believe in magic when it's standing right in front of me. She moved closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. I believe that some things are meant to be, and I believe that I'm about to kiss you, if that's okay. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Her lips were soft against mine, tentative at first, then growing more confident as I responded. She tasted like coffee and possibility, like the promise of spring after a long winter. When we finally broke apart, I felt like I was floating. Wow, I whispered. Yeah, she agreed, resting her forehead against mine. Wow. The orchid behind us seemed to shimmer in the afternoon light, its bud opening just a little bit more. The next 3 months were the happiest of my life. Danielle and I fell into a rhythm as natural as photosynthesis. She'd pick me up from the university lab in the evenings, her truck smelling like soil and jasmine, and we'd spend hours in her greenhouse, working side by side on our respective projects. She became my research partner, helping me set up experiments with her plants and offering insights that my academic training had never considered. In return, I helped her understand the scientific principles behind her intuitive gardening methods, showing her how to document her observations in ways that could be replicated and shared. But it was more than just work. Danielle had a way of making everything feel like an adventure. She'd wake me up at dawn to watch the sunrise from her rooftop garden, coffee in hand, and her hair still mussed from sleep. She'd surprise me with picnics in botanical gardens, where we'd spend hours identifying rare species and debating the ethics of invasive plant removal. "You're overthinking it," she'd say when I got too caught up in the academic side of things. "Plants don't care about peer review. They care about light and water and love." Love isn't a measurable variable, I'd argue, but I was smiling when I said it, isn't it? She gestured to her thriving greenhouse, to the way her plants seemed to bend toward her when she walked by. "Look around, Jules. Love is the only variable. That matters." She called me Jules, and I called her Dani. We had inside jokes about photosynthesis and shared theories about plant consciousness. She taught me to trust my instincts, and I taught her to document her successes. We were building something beautiful together, something that felt as permanent as the perennial flowers in her garden. I should have known it was too good to last. It started with a video. Danielle had been experimenting with vertical gardens, trying to maximize growing space in small urban environments. She'd built this incredible living wall in her backyard, and I'd been documenting the process for my research on plant community structures. "Just film me explaining the watering system," she'd said, adjusting the camera angle on my phone. "Maybe it'll help someone else who's trying to grow food in a small space." The video was supposed to be a simple tutorial, 5 minutes of Danielle explaining how to create a self-watering vertical garden using recycled materials. But there was something about the way she talked to the camera, the way she made complex concepts seem accessible and fun, that made the video special. I posted it on a small gardening forum, thinking maybe a few dozen people would find it helpful. Within 24 hours, it had been shared thousands of times. Within a week, it had over 1 million views. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to Danielle. Gardening magazines called for interviews. Home improvement shows wanted her as a guest expert. Instagram influencers begged her to collaborate on sponsored content. At first, it was exciting. We'd curl up on her couch at night, scrolling through comments from people who'd been inspired to start their own gardens. There were photos of windowsill, herb gardens in tiny apartments, rooftop vegetable plots in urban neighborhoods, and classroom projects where children were learning to grow their own food. "Look at this," Danielle would say, showing me a message from a teacher in Detroit who'd used her techniques to create a school garden. "We're actually making a difference, Jules." But as the attention grew, so did the demands on her time. Production. Companies wanted her to develop a whole series of videos. Brands offered lucrative sponsorship deals. A major publisher reached out about a book contract. "This could change everything," she told me one evening as she scrolled through emails on her laptop. "I could reach millions of people, teach them that growing food doesn't have to be expensive or complicated." "That's amazing," I said, and I meant it. But I also noticed that she hadn't looked up from her screen in 20 minutes. The calls started coming at all hours. Danielle would excuse herself from dinner to take meetings with producers on the East Coast. She'd disappear into her office for hours, working on content calendars and brand partnerships. The greenhouse, once our shared sanctuary, became a stage for filming tutorials and sponsored content. "I'm building something here," she'd say when I expressed concern about the pace. "This platform could fund the community garden project. We soldiers could actually make my 5-year plan happen in 2 years." But somewhere along the way, we got lost in the shuffle. The first missed date happened on a Tuesday. We were supposed to meet for lunch at our usual spot, the little cafe where we'd had our first coffee 3 months earlier. I sat at our regular table, watching my sandwich grow cold as I waited for her to show up. Finally, my phone buzzed with a text. "So sorry, Jules. Emergency call with the Food Network." Rain check. I understood. Opportunities like this didn't come along often, and Danielle had worked hard to get where she was. But as I walked back to the lab alone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between us. The missed dates became more frequent. Dinners cut short by urgent calls from her manager. Weekend trips to botanical gardens canceled because she had to film content for a new sponsorship deal. Our quiet evenings in the greenhouse were replaced by bright lights and camera crews, turning our intimate space into a professional set. "You could be in the videos," Danielle suggested one evening as she adjusted ring lights around her workbench. People love the idea of us working together. The scientist and the gardener, you know. "I don't want to be in the videos, Danny. I want to be with you." She paused, looking up from her camera setup. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I miss you." "I miss us. When's the last time we just sat together and talked about plants without filming it or turning it into content?" "This is important, Jules. This platform is our chance to make a real impact." "Our chance? Or your chance?" The words hung between us like a challenge. Danielle's face tightened, and I immediately regretted my tone. "I'm doing this for us," she said quietly. "For the community gardens. For everything we talked about building together. But you're building it without me. You're here. You're part of this, am I? Because it feels like I'm just watching from the sidelines while you live your life on mine." She set down her camera with a sharp click. "That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my research? When's the last time we worked on something together that wasn't destined for social media?" "My research is important too, Juliana. Just because it's not happening in a university lab doesn't mean it's not valid." "I never said it wasn't valid. I said I miss you." But she was already turning back to her camera, her shoulders rigid with frustration. "I can't do this right now. I have a video to finish." I watched her for a moment, this woman I'd fallen in love with, who was now treating me like an interruption in her schedule. "Okay, I'll leave you to it." I walked out of the greenhouse, and for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't follow me. The final straw came on a Saturday in December. Danielle had promised to help me with a crucial experiment involving plant stress responses to environmental changes. We'd planned the timing weeks in advance, coordinating our schedules around her filming commitments. The experiment required precise timing. We had to monitor the plant's reactions at specific intervals over a 12-hour period. I arrived at the greenhouse at 6 a.m., my equipment bag heavy with sensors and data loggers. Danielle was already there, but she was on her phone, pacing among the plants while talking animatedly to someone on the other end. I know, she was saying. "But the lighting in the studio is perfect right now. Can't we push the garden segment to next week?" She held up a finger when she saw me, the universal signal for "give me a minute." I started setting up my equipment, assuming she'd wrap up quickly. An hour later, she was still on the phone. "Danny," I said quietly when she paused to take a breath, "we need to start the experiment. The timing is critical." "5 more minutes," she whispered, covering the phone with her hand. "This is about the book deal. It's huge." But it wasn't 5 more minutes. It was another hour, then another. By the time she finally hung up, we'd missed the optimal window for the experiment. 3 weeks of preparation wasted. I'm so sorry. Jules, she said, but she was already checking her phone again, scanning for messages. Can we reschedule? Maybe tomorrow? Tomorrow is Sunday. I have family dinner. Monday then. Monday, I am presenting my preliminary findings to the dissertation committee. You know, the presentation I've been preparing for months. I started packing up my equipment, trying to keep my voice level. The one you were supposed to help me practice for tonight. She looked up from her phone, and I saw the moment she realized what she'd forgotten. Oh God, Jules, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot, I know. I shouldered my bag, heavy with unused equipment. Just like you forgot our anniversary dinner last week and the conference I invited you to last month. Those things are important to you. I get that. But this is my career we're talking about. This is bigger than what? Than us. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and painful. Danielle's phone buzzed with another notification, and I watched her glance at it automatically. Don't, I said. Don't look at that. Right now. But she was already reading the message, her face brightening. Oh, this is perfect. The producer wants to do a live stream tomorrow about winter plant care. If I can get the setup ready tonight. She trailed off, finally noticing my expression. I'm losing you, I said quietly. I'm standing right here and I'm losing you. To a screen. You're not losing me, you're being dramatic. Am I? When's the last time you looked at me, really looked at me, without checking your phone? She started to answer, then stopped. We both knew she couldn't. I need some air, I said, heading for the door. Jules, wait. I'll call you later. But I didn't call her later. And she didn't call me either. The next few weeks passed in a blur of misconnections and careful avoidance. We'd text occasionally, polite, distant messages about rescheduling plans or asking about each other's work. But the easy intimacy we'd shared was gone, replaced by the awkward formality of two people who'd forgotten how to be together. Threw myself into my dissertation research, spending long hours in the lab and avoiding the parts of the city where I might run into her. My plants seemed to sense my distress. The ferns I'd been studying for months began to wilt despite perfect growing conditions. Maybe they're responding to your emotional state, my lab partner suggested. If your theory about plant consciousness is correct, they might be picking up on your stress. The idea that my heartbreak was literally affecting my research should have been fascinating from an academic perspective. Instead, it just made me feel more isolated. Even my plants miss Danielle. I considered calling her a dozen times, but pride kept me from dialing. She'd made her choice, and it wasn't me. I'd always known that I was quieter, more introverted, less comfortable with attention than she was. Maybe I'd been naive to think we could work long term. But late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd find myself scrolling through her social media. Her follower count had exploded to over 2 million. She was everywhere, magazine covers, TV appearances, collaborative videos with other influencers. She looked happy, successful, like she was living exactly the life she dreamed of. I was proud of her. I was also heartbroken. Winter turned to spring, and I finally defended my dissertation. The presentation went well. My research on plant communication had implications for everything from agriculture to environmental conservation. Several professors suggested I consider turning my findings into a book for general audiences. Think about it, Dr. Martinez said after the defense. Your work deserves a wider platform. You could reach people who would never step foot in an academic journal. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, I'd been critical of Danielle for choosing popular appeal over academic rigor. Now I was being encouraged to do the same thing. I celebrated my doctorate with a quiet dinner with my parents, then spent the evening walking through the city, trying to figure out what came next. My research had opened doors to postdoc opportunities across the country. I could go anywhere, study anything, start fresh. But as I wandered through the arts district, my feet carried me toward familiar territory. I told myself I was just taking a nostalgic walk, saying goodbye to the neighborhood where I'd been so happy. I had no intention of seeking out Danielle or the greenhouse that had once felt like home. Then I turned a corner and saw her. She was kneeling in a vacant lot, her hands deep in the soil, planting what looked like marigolds. There was no camera, crew, no ring lights, no phone in sight. Just Danielle, alone with the dirt and the plants, looking more like herself than she had in months. I stopped walking, frozen by the sight of her. She'd cut her hair shorter, and she looked thinner than I remembered. But there was something peaceful about her posture, something that reminded me of the woman I'd fallen in love with in the greenhouse. She looked up as if sensing my presence, and our eyes met across the empty lot. "Jules," she said, and my name sounded like a prayer. "Hi, Danny." We stared at each other for a long moment, 6 months of silence stretching between us. Then she stood, wiping her hands on her jeans, the same gesture I'd seen her make 1,000 times in the greenhouse. I thought this spot needed saving, she said, gesturing to the marigolds she'd been planting. I looked around the lot, really seeing it for the first time. Someone had been working here for weeks, maybe months. The weeds had been cleared, the soil had been turned and amended. Young plants dotted the space in careful rows, vegetables, herbs, flowers all growing together in the kind of intentional chaos that was Danielle's signature. "It's beautiful," I said. "It's a community garden. Well, it will be. I'm trying to get the permits approved, but the city moves slowly." She paused, looking down at her dirt-covered hands. "I wanted to create something real, something that would outlast the internet. What about your platform, your book deal?" I walked away from most of it, kept the book, but made it about community gardening instead of personal branding. Turns out having 2 million followers doesn't mean much if you don't have anyone to share your life with. The words hit me like a physical blow. Danny ... I know I don't have the right to ask, but ... She looked up at me, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I've missed you. I've missed us. I've missed the woman who taught me that plants have feelings and that love is the only variable that matters. You never believed that. You said love wasn't measurable." "I was wrong about a lot of things." She took a tentative step toward me. "But I was right about one thing. I was right about you being worth it." I felt my carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "You hurt me, Danny. You chose everything else over me. I know, and I'm sorry." I got so caught up in the possibility of changing the world that I forgot about the person who had already changed mine. "What makes you think it can be different now?" She gestured to the garden around us. "Because I'm different now. Because I learned that impact isn't about how many people follow you online. It's about how deeply you connect with the people who matter." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in tissue paper. "I found something while I was planting. I think it's meant for you." I unwrapped the tissue paper and gasped. Inside was a small ring, simple silver shaped like a vine with tiny leaves. It looked handmade, delicate, like something that had been crafted with love. "I don't understand. I buried it there 3 months ago," she said quietly, "after I realized I'd lost the best thing that had ever happened to me. I thought maybe if I planted it like a seed, if I built something beautiful around it, you might come back." I looked up at her, this woman who had broken my heart and was now trying to put it back together with dirt and flowers and impossible hope. "You buried a ring in a vacant lot and hoped I'd find it?" I buried a ring in a vacant lot and then spent 3 months building a garden around it because I hoped you'd find me. She smiled through her tears. I told you I believe in magic. That's not magic, Danny. That's just crazy. Maybe, but I'm crazy about you, Jules. I'm crazy about the way you talk to plants like they're your friends. I'm crazy about the way you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating. I'm crazy about the way you see beauty in things other people overlook. She dropped to one knee in the dirt, right there among the marigolds. I'm not asking you to marry me, she said quickly. I know I have to earn that right back, but I'm asking you to let me try. I'm asking you to let me show you that I've learned how to put you first. I'm asking you to help me build something real. I looked down at the ring in my palm, then at the woman kneeling in the dirt, then at the garden she'd built around the hope that I might come back. It's not the only thing that needs saving, I said quietly. What? You said the lot needed saving, but it's not the only thing. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Jules ... I knelt down beside her, there in the dirt between the marigolds. I missed you too, Danny. I missed you so much it hurt to breathe. She reached out and cupped my face in her hands, her thumbs brushing away tears I didn't realize I was crying. Can we try again? She whispered. Can we grow something together? I nodded, not trusting my voice. And then she kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise. While the marigolds bloomed around us like a benediction, rebuilding wasn't easy. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend overnight like a stem that's been snapped. It grows back slowly, carefully, with attention and patience, and the kind of daily care that makes love sustainable. Danielle kept her promise. She turned down lucrative sponsorship deals that would have required too much travel. She set boundaries around her filming schedule, blocking out time for us that was sacred and non-negotiable. She deleted social media apps from her phone and stopped checking her follower count obsessively. I want to be present, she told me one evening as we worked side by side in the community garden. I want to be here with you, not performing for strangers online. In return, I learned to speak up about my needs instead of suffering in silence. I told her when I felt neglected, when I needed her attention, when I was proud of her success. I started joining her for some of her video projects, not as a performer, but as a partner, sharing the scientific knowledge that complemented her intuitive understanding of plants. The community garden became our shared project, our way of building something together that was bigger than either of us alone. We applied for grants, organized volunteer days, and slowly transformed the vacant lot into a thriving space where neighbors could grow food, children could learn about nature, and people could connect with the earth and each other. Look at this, Danielle said one morning, showing me a photo someone had posted online. It was a little girl, maybe 6 years old, holding a tomato she'd grown in one of our raised beds. She was beaming with pride, dirt smudged on her cheek. She's beautiful, I said. She's what it's all about. Not the followers, not the brand. Deals, this. Real people growing real food and learning that they can nurture life. We named the garden, bloomed together, and it became the heart of our relationship. We'd arrive early in the morning, before the volunteers and visitors, and spend an hour just walking among the plants, checking on their progress, planning improvements. These quiet moments, just the two of us and the growing things, reminded us why we'd fallen in love in the first place. Spring brought new challenges. The city, impressed by our success, offered to expand the garden into the adjacent lots. It was everything we dreamed of, but it also meant more responsibility, more coordination, more time away from each other. We can hire a manager, Danielle suggested as we sat in her kitchen, surrounded by grant applications and volunteer schedules. Someone to handle the day-to-day operations? With what money? The grants barely cover supplies and maintenance. My book advance, the publisher sent the check last week. I looked up from the paperwork. Danny, that's your money. You earned it. I earned it writing about what we built together. Besides, she reached across the table and took my hand. What's the point of having money if I can't use it to buy more time with you? It was a small moment, but it represented everything that had changed between us. The old Danielle would have reinvested every penny into growing her platform. This Danielle understood that some things were more valuable than growth metrics. We hired Maya, a recent graduate from the environmental studies program, who brought fresh energy and organizational skills to the garden. With her handling the logistics, Danielle and I could focus on what we loved most: the plants, the research, the quiet magic of watching things grow. Summer was our season of abundance. The garden exploded with life, and so did our relationship. We'd spend evenings harvesting vegetables with the neighborhood kids, teaching them to identify edible plants and explaining the science behind photosynthesis. Danielle's videos from this period were different from her earlier work, more thoughtful, more collaborative, less focused on her as an individual, and more on the community we were building. "You're a natural teacher," I told her one evening, as we watched her explain companion planting to a group of elderly volunteers. "Look how they light up when you talk." "I learned from the best," she said, nudging me with her elbow. "You taught me that knowledge is only valuable when it's shared." But it was autumn that tested us most. The garden's success had attracted attention from developers who wanted to buy the lots for a luxury condo project. The city was wavering, drawn by the promise of higher tax revenue. "We'll fight it," Danielle said, her jaw set with determination. "We'll get the community organized, petition the city council, make noise until they listen. What if we lose? Then we lose, but we don't give up without a fight." The campaign consumed us for weeks. We attended city council meetings, organized rallies, collected signatures from neighbors who had come to love the garden. Danielle used her platform to raise awareness, creating content that went viral for all the right reasons. Not because it was trendy, but because it mattered. I watched her during this time, marveling at how she'd grown. The woman who had once been seduced by follower counts and brand deals was now using her influence to protect something real, something that couldn't be monetized or commodified. "I'm proud of you," I told her one night as we lay in bed, exhausted from another day of activism. "We haven't won yet. I'm not proud of you for winning. I'm proud of you for fighting, for choosing what matters over what's easy." She rolled onto her side, facing me in the darkness. "I used to think success meant having the most followers, the biggest platform, the loudest voice. But real success is having someone you love tell you they're proud of you. Even if we lose the garden, even then, because we'll build something else together." We didn't lose the garden. The city council, swayed by the community support and the environmental benefits we documented, voted to designate the lots as permanent green space. The celebration that night was everything I'd ever wanted. Neighbors gathered under string lights, children running between the raised beds, the air filled with laughter and the scent of jasmine. But more than the victory, I treasured the moment when Danielle found me in the crowd, wrapped her arms around me, and whispered, "We did it. Jules, we actually did it." Winter gave us permission to rest. The garden slept under a blanket of mulch, and we spent our evenings planning for the next growing season. Danielle had been working on a new book proposal about community organizing through gardening, while I'd been offered a position at the university studying the social benefits of urban agriculture. "It's perfect," she said when I told her about the job offer. "You'll be able to do real research on everything we've learned here. What about us? You'll be traveling for book promotion. I'll be buried in academic work, ... We'll make it work. We know how to prioritize now." She was right. We'd learned to tend our relationship like a garden, with attention, intention, and the understanding that love, like plants, needs consistent care to thrive. It was during one of these quiet winter evenings that Danielle disappeared into the greenhouse, claiming she had something to check on. I was grading papers from the environmental science course I'd been teaching as an adjunct, half listening to the sounds of her moving around among the plants. "Jules," she called. "Can you come here for a minute?" I found her standing beside Miracle, her grandmother's orchid, which had grown into a magnificent specimen over the months we'd been caring for it together. But it was what was beneath the orchid that made me gasp. Danielle had created a small garden display in the corner of the greenhouse, complete with miniature raised beds filled with our favorite plants. In the center was a tiny sign that read, "Bloom together, where love grows." "It's beautiful," I said, kneeling to examine the detailed work. "When did you have time to, Jules?" Her voice was soft, nervous. "Look closer." I leaned in, and there, nestled among the miniature marigolds, was a small velvet box. My heart stopped. Danielle ... I know I messed up before. I know I hurt you, and I know trust takes time to rebuild. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life growing things with you. Gardens, community, a family maybe, if you want that too. I looked up at her, this woman who had taught me that love could be cultivated, that broken things could be healed, that the most beautiful growth often came after the harshest winters. "I want to marry you, Jules. I want to promise you that I'll never again choose anything over us. I want to build a life where we're partners in everything, the messy, complicated, beautiful work of loving each other and caring for the world." She knelt beside me, taking the box from among the flowers. "Will you marry me?" The ring inside was the same vine-shaped silver band from the vacant lot, but now it was paired with a matching one. Simple, elegant, grown from the same metal, like two plants sharing the same soil. "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes, Donnie, yes." She slipped the ring onto my finger with shaking hands, then kissed me with the desperate relief of someone who had been holding their breath for months. "I love you," she said against my lips. "I love you so much it scares me." "I love you too, and I'm not scared anymore." Above us, Miracle's latest bloom seemed to shimmer in the greenhouse light, as if approving of what she'd witnessed. We were married the following spring in the community garden surrounded by the plants we'd grown together. The ceremony was simple, just family, close friends, and the neighbors who had become our extended family through the garden. Maya officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. "Danielle and Juliana," she said, her voice carrying across the small gathering, "have taught all of us that love, like gardening, is about patience, attention, and faith in things we cannot see. They've shown us that the most beautiful growth often comes after the hardest seasons." I looked at Danielle as Maya spoke, taking in the woman who had become my partner in every sense of the word. She was wearing a simple white dress, her hair crowned with flowers from the garden, and she was looking at me like I was the most precious thing she'd ever grown. "Do you, Danielle, take Juliana to be your partner in all seasons, through the planting and the harvest, the growth and the dormancy, the sunshine and the storms?" "I do," she said, her voice strong and clear. "I promise to tend our love like the most precious plant in my garden." "And do you, Juliana, take Danielle to be your partner in all seasons, through the questions and the discoveries, the failures and the breakthroughs, the known and the unknown?" "I do," I said, squeezing her hands. "I promise to nurture what we've built together, always." Then, by the power vested in me by the state of California and the internet, I pronounce you married. You may kiss your wife. And we did, surrounded by the cheers of our community and the fragrance of the flowers we'd planted together. It was perfect in its imperfection, beautiful in its simplicity, real in a way that no amount of social media engagement could ever capture. The reception was a potluck in the garden, with neighbors bringing dishes made from vegetables they'd grown in our raised beds. Children ran between the tables, their laughter mixing with the sounds of acoustic guitars and the distant hum of bees in the sunflower patch. No regrets? Danielle asked as we danced to a song played by one of the volunteer musicians. About what? About choosing the quiet life. About marrying the woman who almost lost you to her own ambition. I pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, mixed with the jasmine that climbed the garden's fences. I didn't choose the quiet life, Danny. I chose you. And you're anything but quiet. She laughed, the sound I'd fallen in love with that first day at the flea market. True, but I'm yours now, completely, permanently yours. And I'm yours through all the seasons. That was 5 years ago. As I tell you this story now, I'm sitting in the expanded Bloom Together community garden, watching Danielle teach a group of teenagers about soil composition while our 2-year-old daughter, Rosa, plays in the dirt nearby. She's named after Danielle's grandmother, who would have loved to see what we've built together. Our life isn't perfect. We still disagree about plant care techniques, still struggle to balance our work and our relationship, still have moments when the old patterns threaten to resurface. But we've learned to tend our love like the gardeners we are, with patience, attention, and the deep knowledge that the most beautiful things take time to grow. The garden has expanded to cover 3 city blocks now, with satellite locations, in 2 other neighborhoods. Danielle's book about community organizing became a bestseller, leading to speaking engagements around the country. But she's careful now about travel, never accepting more than 1 trip per month, always making sure we have time for what matters most. My research on plant-human relationships has evolved into a whole new field of study. I'm working on a book of my own now about the ways that caring for plants can heal communities and individuals. It's academic work, but written for everyone, the kind of accessible science that Danielle taught me to value. Tell me again, Rosa says, looking up from the handful of earthworms she's been examining. Tell me about the flower lady. She means Danielle, though Rosa calls her Mama Danny. The flower lady is her favorite part of our love story. Once upon a time, I begin, settling her on my lap, there was a woman who could make anything grow. She had magic in her fingers and sunshine in her smile, and she believed that love was the most important ingredient in any garden. Like our garden? Just like our garden. But the flower lady was lonely because she hadn't found anyone who understood her magic. Until one day, at a market full of old treasures, she met a scientist who talked to plants. That's you, Mama Jules. That's me. And when their hands touched over an old book, something magical happened. They realized they'd been looking for each other their whole lives. Rosa claps her hands, delighted by the story she's heard dozens of times. Across the garden, Danielle looks up from her teaching and waves at us, her face glowing with the kind of happiness that can't be captured in pixels or posts. Did they live happily ever after? Rosa asks. They lived happily ever after, I confirm. But more importantly, they learned that ever after isn't a destination. It's a choice they make every day to tend their love like the most precious plant in their garden. As the sun sets over the garden, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I hold my daughter close and watch my wife share her passion with the next generation. This is our story, not a fairy tale with a neat ending, but a living, growing thing that continues to bloom with each passing season. And in the greenhouse at home, Miracle continues to flower, her blooms a testament to the magic that happens when 2 people choose to grow together through all the seasons of love.